John Calipari, who is one of the more well-known college basketball coaches, one of the more successful college basketball coaches, although not so much in the NCAA tournament, after 15 years with the Kentucky Wildcats, is leaving the organization to join the University of Arkansas, which is pretty unprecedented of a move, given it was expected he would end his career in Kentucky and be kind of like a Mike Krzyzewski figurehead at Duke. And because of the strong history of the Kentucky basketball program, the level of talent and stars that have come out of that program over the years, it's expected to be a pretty big job opening that is looking to be filled and filled rather quickly as they recruit for the upcoming season. Now, as some of you know, I really don't follow college basketball that much. I used to back when I was in college, but have since solely focused on the NBA. But there's one thing I do know about college ball, is that this coaching position, a coaching position like this, is going to be highly coveted. And while I don't think this is going to happen, which I'll explain why, there have been rumors that the Bulls head coach Billy Donovan could be interested in this job, which I'm sure is music to a lot of Bulls fans' ears, or at least the ones who can't stand Billy Donovan, that there is hope that Billy could be on the move much sooner than we anticipated. So let's talk about it. But first, guys, be sure to check out our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. You know, despite the frustrating loss from the Bulls last night against the Orlando Magic, one thing I was happy about is I actually took the lower on Franz Wagner in points, which he didn't hit, and I had the higher on DeMar in points and 25.5 because DeMar has literally been doing everything on offense for this team. So despite the loss, I walked away with a little bit of money. So if you're into making predictions on player stats, check out Underdog Fantasy. They have higher or lowers on player stats. You can win up to 5 times your money in a single night. And of course, they're matching any deposit up to $100. Who doesn't want free money? It's also a great way to support the channel. I'll leave a link to the site and the code in the description if you're interested. Now, I'll say this briefly because I've mentioned it quite a few times on the channel over the course of the last couple of seasons, but most of you know when the Bulls hired Billy Donovan, I wasn't too pleased with the hiring. Obviously, I thought he was better than Jim Boylan because really anyone would have been at that point, but I was surprised the Bulls opted to hire Donovan when at the time there were a lot of first-time head coaches that were expected to be in the running for that job. 2 names in particular that I was interested in were Ime Udoka and Jamal Mosley, who have gone on to be great coaches thus far in their early head coaching careers. And even though I didn't have the channel at that time, I talked about this on Twitter about how I felt personally like college coaches making that transition to the NBA was always a hard one. You would see some of the best college coaches in basketball come to the NBA and be terrible at it. Now, that's not to say that it's all on the coaches, because they have to have the right roster around them to be able to succeed, which they don't have as much control over as they do in college when they're the ones recruiting the players out of high school. But coaching at the NBA level, managing egos, players getting millions of dollars, and guys who are at the pinnacle of their craft versus young college athletes who, for the most part, aren't getting paid money, aren't playing for their next big contract, and for a coach focusing on player development, it's a very different world when it comes to coaching these differing levels of personalities and player egos from college to the NBA. And I felt like with Billy Donovan, he was a great college coach, one of the better coaches in the NCAA, with his ability to recruit and getting the most out of his young players. Coaching at the NBA level, I didn't feel like he was as effective at, especially in his time in Oklahoma City. While not a bad coach by any means, like he was much better than a lot of college coaches making the jump to the NBA before him, but I felt like he relied way too much on his star players and was almost too much of a player's coach that it was a detriment to the team when he wouldn't hold his star players accountable. And I felt like he wasn't as creative in thinking outside of the box and making the right adjustments in-game to allow for the Thunder to be effective in those years where they had multiple superstars between when it was first Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and then later on Paul George. But look, all of the things we've talked about on why I don't feel Donovan is the right coach for this Bulls team, the things that have bothered me about his coaching, the X's and O's, getting the most out of the lineup even though it's a flawed roster, which isn't his fault, but getting the most out of the lineup with what he has to work with anyway is part of a coach's job. All of the complaints, still, I don't think Billy Donovan is as bad as some Bulls fans make him out to be. I think he's an average coach to slightly below average, and when you have an average coach and an average team, what do you get? Well, you get what you've seen from the Bulls this past 3 seasons. And because of that, I would absolutely welcome a coaching change purely for the fact that it would actually mean some change is going to happen to this organization. Like, one of the things that has me depressed about the Bulls' future is not only the fact that this front office continues to cling onto this idea that somehow this roster is going to turn things around and we'll just keep running it back, but it's also the fact that Billy Donovan is under contract for a long period of time. For whatever reason, they are all about Billy Donovan, as if he can do no wrong. And because he's under contract, and we know ownership doesn't like firing coaches and paying them to do nothing since that money will still be owed to him, the Bulls are effectively stuck with Billy for the foreseeable future, unless another team, organization, or program wants him and he opts out of his contract and there is a buyout of some kind to relieve him of his duties with the Bulls. Then we got something going. Here's the thing. Do I actually think Kentucky's going to pursue Billy Donovan? No. Because I think there are a lot of better options, college coaches that are going to be bigger front runners for that type of job. Like, this is a major program, and they're going to want the best of the best. And hiring a coach who has a great college resume, but hasn't coached in the NCAA for nearly a decade now might not be the best option to go to Kentucky, who just lost one of the greatest coaches in college basketball history. That said, though, the fact that this is even a topic, and it becoming apparent that there is this expectation that the Bulls could look to do a roster reset or retool, which it's about time, but the fact that we know Billy Donovan, who left OKC because he didn't want to be a part of a rebuild, even though OKC is already in a much better place than the Bulls are, funny enough, but because we know Billy Donovan doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild, which, okay, maybe the Bulls won't do and be dumb enough to run this roster back with the hope that Lonzo Ball returns to form next season, but because it's heading in that direction, where the Bulls should do a reset of some kind, which would mean they're not going to be contending for a period of time, and it would likely mean that Billy Donovan is going to look to go elsewhere, whether it be Kentucky or somewhere else. And if Billy leaving means that it pushes the front office to go in another direction and start fresh, I am all for that. Like, yes, part of me wants to see Lonzo return and see if that somehow can revitalize this group. Yeah, I don't want to go through another long rebuild where we see this team lose year after year, but I just don't see that many options at this point. Not with the way the Bulls are currently at and being a mid-team with aging veterans. Yeah, some of the games are exciting. Sure, they're not finishing the season with 20 to 25 wins, but to what end? A perpetual state of mediocrity and the play-in every season? Just isn't it. Now, who would be some of the coaches that could fill that role should Donovan actually leave? I mean, I don't know. Guys like Kenny Atkinson could be a good option. There's some assistants on the Boston Celtics who are vying for head coaching positions. We also don't know if there will be some changes when the season ends with certain coaches getting fired or leaving their team depending on how they show up in the playoffs. Like, would Ty Lue hang around in LA if the Clippers get bounced in the first round yet again? I don't know. All I know is I would welcome a change. Haven't seen some change to this organization for some time now, and all they have to show for it is one playoff win since the new regime took over. That said, I still think Billy Donovan is going to remain with the Bulls and the front office is going to run this team back for a fourth year, if I'm being honest, but let me know what you guys think. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.